Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today we're going to be going into a scene-by-scene breakdown of Into the Forest, our first found footage movie and our fifth movie out of our 11 total. Right now you can go ahead and take a look at The Haunting of the Murder House. It is online on Amazon Prime. You can take a look at Girl in Cabin 13, which is on Tubi, and also Into the Forest, which is now on Tubi as well too. So really in these episodes, we want to kind of highlight a breakdown of what went right, what went wrong, what we would change. And what's really unique about this is actually going to be one of the next features that we're doing. So we're currently in the process of what we're dubbing now Into the Forest 2.0, in the sense that we're really looking at reviewing this concept and seeing how we can take some improvements to it. So I'm pretty excited, to hop into this movie just to kind of, see what we are looking at improving, just because we're already pretty far along. So before we hop in, what is kind of your general thoughts of Into the Forest and how it fits in the DBS film saga?
Well, this one was our first found footage movie. And if you watch a lot of horror movies, you know that found footage is something that you should probably explore. And I like this movie. It didn't do as well as the other movies that we've released, which is kind of surprising because I thought it would do really well because found footage is so popular. But I think we really kind of struggled with just the overall story of this one. It confused a lot of people, and you never want to confuse your audience members. And I think a lot of people just dropped off. That being said, it was really easy shoot. It was really easy to edit. The post-production process of a found footage movie is much easier. So it was kind of disappointed, but I had wanted to test out found footage. I was like, all right, we're going to devote the next two movies to making found footage movies, and this was the first one. But really, I mean, it's a smooth shoot. There was actually a tropical storm or a hurricane at the time that was causing a lot of issues. So we had to kind of cheat like the campground. The campground is actually like right outside of our location, because we had to run in and out because of the storm swells that were coming through off the coast of Florida. But we made it happen. We got it released pretty quickly, and it did well. It allowed us to really learn and take a good look at how to actually create a story that people can follow. And this just comes back to the importance of making a 2.0 version of this movie, which is what we're about to do. The fact that we uploaded this movie allows me to take a bird's eye view of the movie, figure out what I would make better. And that's what we're going to do in the 2.0 version. And honestly, you're going to watch both these movies. They're going to have similar concepts, but at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to really realize, outside of a few characters and a few beats, that they are actually the same movie, which is just going to show how much better we've gotten throughout the process.
Exactly. And, really to me, I remember when we hopped into this, we were very eager because it's like, oh, found footage, found footage. Let's basically see if this is the ticket or not, because we're going from cinematic to found footage. And there really is a whole host of difficulties that come from found footage, but there's also a ton of benefits. I think the main one being, just the production. So quickly to just kind of hop into that, the differences that we're seeing with found footage and cinematic. And really it was something where we went back into found footage because of the feedback from our Discord channel, in the sense of, hey, you guys should do a found footage. We like Into the Forest. These concepts are resonating. So it almost kind of pushed us back to that. But quickly, do you want to talk about the benefits and pitfalls of, found footage? For me, it's the big thing is you really, really need to rely heavily on your actors because they have long dialogue scenes. You don't typically have as many cut points as cinematic, which means you really are kind of in their hands when it comes to getting the scenes and getting the takes done. And I think that's just a testament to the Into the Forest team and, how well they did. And then the benefits to me is I think they're very smooth shoots. There's very minimal editing. So once you have the movie done, you're pretty much almost ready to go because it's like drag and drop in the editor.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the production is going to be much easier. The post production is going to be much easier, but you really have to be careful for two reasons. The first is making sure that your actors have the ability to go through about a minute or 2 minute of dialogue with there's no cuts. So they honestly have to get it. It almost becomes like a theater performance where you really can't screw up. And if you screw up, you kind of have to ad lib off each other. So you have to have actors that understand, know their lines, know their roles, that are free to interpret their roles, and that actually have good chemistry, can play off each other, because your actors aren't going to nail the lines every single time, and they're going to have to improvise. And if you have actors that just cannot improvise on the fly, you're going to have to cut a lot of these shots, and it's going to cause frustration, and it's going to slow down your production. The second thing is you have to make sure that you're getting these takes. Like, you have to make sure the audio is perfect. You have to make sure that the visual quality is perfect, because there's no going back. You can't really chop these up too much. So, as a DP, as a guy who's getting the audio for these, I'm kind of nervous heading into the Force 2.0, because I understand that I have to go back and really listen to make sure when I say, all right, look, this is the take that I want to use, I want to make sure that the audio is clean, the video is clean, and that we can actually move on. Because the worst thing we could do is I could be like, yeah, thumbs up, we're moving on to the next scene. And there's something wrong with that actual take. In cinematic, if a lav mic falls off, or there's something, I go out of focus on one of these shots, I can cut around that, and it's just easier to fix a lot of problems. I can actually manipulate what the actors can say. I can manipulate the pacing. In a found footage movie, you just don't have that luxury.
Yep, that's kind of the give and take of it. And I will say there's a very strong built-in audience for found footage as well, too. I mean, I kind of knew that was there, but going through like the rabbit hole and whatnot, I really am impressed by the dedication. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of found footage, so I think maybe that's why I wasn't really looking. But there's a very hardcore group of film fanatics that really enjoy the found footage genre. So, and I think, being a staple of indie filmmaking, I always say, hey, it might not be my cup of tea, but it definitely has its abilities and its resources. And again, as you mentioned, really excited for, the Into the Force 2.0, because it's going to show the development and the skill that we have coming from. So it is something where I'm very excited, just to see again how we've improved and essentially how we've developed as just story makers and filmmakers. Because I do believe, we talk about how The Devil in the Room and The Morgan Estate were kind of the first times we got more a hold of the story in the sense of being able to tell it. So I'm really curious how we pull a lot of different things off. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into our first take at Into the Forest. Now, I know, as you mentioned, that there were some issues when it comes to filming. I believe the intro was one thing that had to get scrapped, because we did end up having to do a classic found footage pickup in the middle of it, in the sense of doing that. And overall, I think it's okay. I don't think it's bad. I think you kind of get the idea there. But I know it's one of the things that kind of stands out to you as just something that's not really too interesting when it comes to the intro.
Yeah, no, this was the intro that we've always had in there. We wanted to do the flashback. You see it a lot in horror movies where it's like, oh, we're going to show you a clip from the end of the movie, but we're going to put it in the beginning of the movie so that you can kind of figure out what's going on. The problem is that, I don't think the actor, it doesn't sound very scared. He sounds kind of like upset. You don't really know what's going on. And there's no tension there. The tension just kind of like flips over. Where I think if we would have had him like looking out in the woods, or, building more suspense, and you end kind of on a mystery hook, I think it would have been better. Or if he would have got pulled out of the tent or something along those lines, I think would have been a better intro. You always want to ask yourself, like, what are you trying to accomplish in this intro? It should be like, there's something out in these woods. Obviously, the actor is very scared and something bad's happening. And then you kind of want to hint at like what that bad thing is, something foreboding to set up the tone of the rest of the movie. I just don't think we really did it. I think the intro is where you kind of pull from the climax and put it in the beginning of the movie. I've never really seen that done too well in, all the thousands of horror movies that I've watched. They do it a lot, but I've never been like, wow, that was actually done really well. So, I mean, I try and avoid that. It's just much easier to get a couple other actors and, have something happen and then, fast forward or, time lapse to, or move forward in time to your actual characters. I think it's just more powerful. I think if we would have did something like we did in the Unseen, where some character got taken, and you can actually see that there's like a threat on that person's life, and then you hard cut to the actual characters of the movie. I think it's just more impactful because now the stakes are raised. You understand that, someone died in the intro scene and that these new characters are actually in danger.
Yeah, I think that's really critical in the sense of, now I think when we look at it, we see the intro as such an opportunity that you wouldn't even just want to waste film. I feel like, to me, it is kind of a trope, and that's probably why I thought that way. If you don't quite necessarily have enough time or something like that, it's easy to extend. But I think it does kind of take you out of the time loop, and you basically sacrifice footage. You essentially say, hey, they're going to watch this footage again. And by doing so, it really ends up taking you, in my opinion, out of that moment, because you're basically like, oh, okay, well, I've seen all of this. So then you're just kind of waiting there, watching it on film again. And I think that does kind of take it out of there. So I'm excited for the, intro that we have for the 2.0 version, which we'll hop into towards the end of this episode. I think one thing that was really good, and this kind of, in my opinion, starts to show off where like you really do need to lean on the actors, is we have a very long intro dump explaining who they are, explaining the stakes with the A&E contract. Even though I think we probably could have done, well, actually, I think that was probably the most clear part of our plot was the A&E contract. I think where we missed out was kind of like her supernatural powers and whatnot. But I think that intro is really solid. I think Bo did a fantastic job as Jimmy here. And I think, that just kind of set everything up to really give you an idea of essentially what's going to happen. So I do think we did a really good job in this intro scene.
Yeah, I think the intro and the character development stuff in this is actually done really well. I'm not a fan of shooting stuff in cars, but I thought we pulled it off pretty well. So you immediately go to the Jimmy character. He's holding the camera like a selfie camera. You understand who they are. We have like a little bit of driving montage, so they're going somewhere. Then we have the seizure scene, which we thought was like a bigger beat. It never really hit properly. And then you have the Betsy character, who I thought came in, did a great job to just show they're out there and the locals are just kind of wacky out there. So I think all that stuff, those three scenes are interesting. They're engaging. They explain what we need to do, which is these are our characters. This is where they're going. This is what they do. I think we could have peppered in some stakes there. And I probably would have, I don't know how to make the seizure scene a little bit more impactful. Honestly, I probably would just move it because it needs to be done at night, or right when they get to the cabin, because they're still far away from the woods. So in theory, it doesn't really make any sense. And I think that just the camera angles never really hit as hard as they possibly could. But, I think this is what our like fourth movie. I think the pacing starting to get there for a downbeat. I thought it's engaging, and I thought we did it pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's something that we start to learn more and more is like you really want to try and keep things at night for a lot of reasons. But like seizure scenes are tough in general too. Just getting an actor to be able to kind of accurately portray that's no easy matter. So like I think it is something where, while it does provide some type of something to it, it's kind of not really fully a scare that we're swinging for. But that being said, I completely agree with what you mentioned, where you really understand what they're doing, you understand who they are, basically the different character roles that they're going to be playing. Jimmy really establishes his character. I think it's something where it overall it's what you want to see in essentially that first 5 to 8 minutes. And next, they pull up to the cabin location that we have. And again, I think, if you look at the Unseen to now, you can really understand that we have a very good idea of character introductions. And this is something where, you think of the character introduction of Brad over the phone with his mom, and that's barely something to where you're kind of at here. And I think, it's a good time to just kind of talk real quick about this is what happens when you end up doing multiple movies. You just end up getting better at the building blocks of the movie. And I think, with Whitlow, you can see it kind of coming together. Into the Forest, we did it to some degree, but you just start seeing that blueprint solidify.
Yeah, I think the main issue with this movie is that the actual lore, which is what the audience really cares most about, the situation that they're going to be in, like what is actually in these woods, was never really fleshed out. And I think that this movie would have been really, really good if we would just flesh that out and explained it a little bit more and made it clear, just really pulled it back from all the little things that we throw at the viewer into like the most basic concept, which is there is a witch in the woods. And I think the other thing that's plagued this movie is the scares just never really hit. Like we just did not pace them properly. We did not shoot them properly. So you're missing these beats. But I mean, honestly, up until now, where we are in the movie, where they actually go inside this cabin, it's very engaging. Now you have two more characters. You get to you're introduced Chase, which is like this little crazy redneck cousin, and you're seeing the cabin, and we're peppering like little pieces of the lore. The Airbnb guy is just saying that he doesn't really believe in the witch, I believe, or maybe he does believe. I can't remember exactly what the dialogue was, but I mean, we're peppering it in there. We're probably 10 minutes into this movie. If it would have had a better intro hook up until now, it's a pretty solid movie as far as like writing a smooth, well-paced screenplay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think, good point that you brought up there with kind of the lore being the thing that was missing. And this is something that we talk about in our past episodes. This movie and The Haunting of the Suicide House were really the two movies that, in my opinion, showed us you have to pick a plot and hammer that point home. Because this is another textbook movie where we have a very detailed plot. And that plot is explained in the scene, which I really like. I think it's a great scene where they kind of hold up the different pictures, explain what's happening. And there's a plot. There's a plot about a witch named Greta who ended up being part of this cult. She brought like 13 kids out there. She had the Devil's Bible. She sacrificed the Devil's Bible. Make sure you don't go out there by yourself, because that's when they can get you. And she gets kids, and there's been a whole bunch of missing things out there. And the problem with that is we explained that all in basically a minute and a half, one after the other. And what we've learned now is you should pick one thing. So Greta was a witch. Greta was a witch. There's a witch in the woods, the witch of Greta. Watch out for Greta the witch. Essentially, you want to look at things like that. Or, Codus Gigas. Okay, there's a Devil's Bible. There's a Devil Bible. And then like the Devil's Bible appears where they're out there, or someone has that. You have to just basically pick one thing and reiterate it, because the problem is, you explain all of these different details and then you never once talk about them again. And you almost kind of bring in new details later on in the movie. And because of that, it's so easy to just, if you're not fully paying attention to the film, and even if you are fully paying attention to the film, it's so easy to completely forget that entire scene just because there's so much going on.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, just in my experience in both the publishing business and the filmmaking business, really, you want to be as minimalistic as possible. Really try and hone down and cut down to the essential plot that your movie is going to be. And this is when we see the most success. And when you start to pepper in different things, different plot lines, different subplots, you complicate things. And we only have an hour 15, hour 20 to tell this movie. We can't really focus on B and C plot lines and keep the viewer engaged in understanding what's going on. So immediately in this scene, like what Kel said, is yes, there should just be a witch out there, and we should focus on the abduction stuff, because the abduction stuff is really what's bringing them out there. It's the danger element to this movie. And it should just been beaten down to the viewer that this has the highest abduction rate in the whole United States, and there's a witch out there, or at least people think there's a witch out there. That's it. Like all this other stuff with all these other missing people and all this stuff, it just kind of complicates things. And the fact that we really only hit on this lore once right here is the biggest problem with this movie, because I remember the feedback that we got from a lot of people just did not understand it. And then the ending kind of confused people because we never really brought up the fact that the witch can change forms, other than the interview with Joe. And really, that was only one sentence. I think in today's age of how people are consuming movies and videos, if they're not in a movie theater, they're going to be on their phone, they're going to be texting, and honestly, they're going to not be like locked in visually to that movie. So you have to be able to explain things because they're still listening, but you have to explain that stuff, and you probably have to explain it, a couple times. I thought we did a really good job in Shapeshifter. I thought we did a really good job in The Murder House of just explaining the plot in interesting ways, kind of peppering it through the movie. We had on those two movies, I haven't got one complaint about people not knowing what was going on. And I think that is like a new milestone for us, because if you can keep people's attention and they understand what's going on, then that's like the foundation of making an indie movie with the hour 15, hour 20 that you're allotted to actually tell this story.
Yeah, it really was probably the biggest thing, for us to understand wise, was just making sure you're beating that plot home in the sense of you want to pick something and run with it. And I think it's really easy to identify now. But back then it was something where you look at it in the script, and to you, because you're writing it, you're like, oh yeah, of course we explain what's going on here. This will totally make sense. I will say we also introduced Nelson Morgan, who is essentially going to be looking at making a comeback when it comes to the Into the Force 2.0. And I really think the concept that we have here of, is it just parents losing their kids and they're dealing with grief, or is it a witch, really is a strong one. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we have latched onto that idea, just because Nelson is a really good character. So that being said, we have our first major pop scare, and that is they wake up in the middle of the night, they heard some noises, they go outside, there is a little fake scare, and then there's a real pop scare of Chase being drunk and just kind of all over the place. I think this is one of the best pop scares that we have there. I mean, I think I like how it's cheap in the sense that it's just a noise pop scare, but hey, you got to do what you have to do in indie filmmaking. And I think this is as solid of a passive pop scare where it's not really a true danger as you can really get.
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing, just do it in the woods. The forest is a creepy place. This is where the witch lives. The fact that we just did it in this like clearing near the cabin is just not as scary as the woods, where anything can pop out of you at any time. And I think you just need to be a little more aggressive and like actually lunge at them. And I think you would have had a better pop scare. This pop scare goes on for way too long, and it just never really builds that suspense all the way up, so you actually get like a good, pop. So it's kind of flat, but he did a great job acting drunk. And it's interesting. It's not like we completely missed on it, like we talked about before. As we're getting better, we're hitting these beats, but we're just not doing them as well as they need to be in order to build that suspense. It's kind of more a mysterious thing because you're like, all right, well, what is this guy? What's he trying to do? Like, what's going on here? And he's a cool character, but it doesn't give you that like fear beat that, you really need the jump, the adrenaline that you need to keep these, or to keep the viewer like kind of hooked to your movie. Because right now, if you're a horror fan, you really haven't seen anything scary. The intro hook was kind of lame. But you're getting to the point where the lore's being built. But I mean, if you're a horror fan, we're probably 15 minutes into this movie, you have to see something that's going to scare you or get you to jump, or there has to be some kind of pop scare. And this one just kind of felt flat, but it felt flat in a way that at least it keeps your attention.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you can always have improvement there, but to me, well, at least in general, I think it's one of the better ones of the movie. So that might not be saying much about the rest of the pop scares, but I definitely agree. I mean, you want to keep it in the woods. You want to add that element. That's where the scare is. And I mean, that's really, again, I'm excited to talk about the 2.0 concept that we're looking at, because we essentially immediately do that. I think another thing to highlight, though, is it is good to have interesting characters like Cousin Chase, because I mean, the whole scene of him wrestling being like she's looking at you, she's watching you, and then they come and they pick him up, and then you have Bo kind of do his little joke about hearing the Dixie song in the moonshine bottle. I mean, it's just well paced in the sense of like our downbeats are starting to improve too. So the entire chase scene and then up until breakfast the next day, it moves really fast and nothing really happens. I mean, I think you get the motion element, which you can see one with the fight of Chase. So that's a big motion element. But the handheld with Bo and kind of the way that they were, were moving, I think it was shot in the way that it really does help those downbeats flow a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great scene. And it ends well with the, Bo kind of like laughing it off. I think it's a character motivation for him because he's kind of like the upbeat, like nothing can really bother me character. I just think like this screenplay right now is pretty solid. It just suffers from a weak intro. It suffers from the pop scares not being as punchy as they possibly can. And it suffers from just the lore having way too many elements to it. Other than that, like if you really look at this is a pretty solid movie so far, and we're like one day into it. And I think it just needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But for the most part, like the screenplay aspect of this is actually pretty solid. I think the actual visual and how we shot it um, wasn't as good as the actual screenplay was.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because I mean, again, you have Chase who is basically fueling the scenes, and then Bo and Kim are able to really kind of push the characters forward as well too. So you have that. I think this is kind of an example of how it could have been potentially shot better, in the sense of we go to, and there are interviews, so there's going to be some element of staticness to it. But I think now we can kind of look at more dynamic cuts or something there. But we get our park ranger scene, which again this is a textbook example of what we were talking about with the lore. Not once does he really touch on the same things that we mentioned before. He touches on the fact that you can't go out there alone. So that maybe was briefly there. And I mean, I remember that being like a big thing for us is don't go alone. And like that barely came through. That was like our biggest push. And like we only mentioned it like twice or three times, but you don't bring enough attention to it. It just kind of gets passed over. But it was essentially, park ranger conspiracy going on. And I saw my mom's been dead, so it's a shapeshifter. So you have a lore dump. It's kind of shot very static, but then on top of that, I think the biggest issue is that lore dump again is just covering, three completely different things.
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of adding more stuff to the plot for no reason. And I know like what you mentioned as far as, you only get taken when you're alone. And the big impact on that is, well, they have Nelson Morgan and his daughter was taken when he was out there with her. So it's supposed to be like this big event where, oh, this is the first time someone was taken when, there are two people out there, which makes really no sense at all. And we try to make it good, but it just never really like happened. That was supposed to be like the reason why they're excited for Nelson Morgan, when really they should be excited for Nelson Morgan because this guy's like, he's kind of a wild card. He's good footage. So, I mean, it comes down to when you have these scenes, you have to ask yourself, what are we trying to accomplish with this park ranger? And I love I haven't seen or my mother's been dead for how many years. I love that line. I think it's great way to end that scene. But we have to bring up the fact that the witch can change forms at some point, and we never did. And this is the only thing in the movie that references, the witch being able to take forms, which is sad because in the climax, that's what happens. The witch takes the form of another character, and this is what really confused people. So if we're going to go with that climax, which I think is really, good, it's a great ending to this movie. We have to bring up multiple times that this witch can change forms. This witch can change forms. This witch could change forms. And we never really do that. So it just ends up confusing people. And then, obviously we want to bring up the lore of like, this guy's a park ranger. What did he see? We kind of like have a lot of just floaty dialogue in there, dialogue that's not very like minimalistic, and it's not moving the plot forward. So I think that this was a crucial scene where we really could have, essentially told or built upon the lore that we've built up through a third party and it would have been a much better movie. People would have understood what's going on, but you have the locals as far as like Chase and Betsy saying crazy kind of stuff. Then you have the two narrating to the camera with a whole bunch of different things about Codus Gigas and all kinds of crazy stuff. Then you have Joe coming in here talking about shapeshifters, his mother, and being a park ranger, and he's like talking about conspiracy stuff. I mean, this is just like, look at like what I just talked about. This is just so much plot to like kind of go through. I have no idea what's going on right now. I don't know if this is real, if this is fake, if this is a conspiracy, if this is a shapeshifter, if this is Greta Fulmer, or is this like I just have no idea. And this is like where we made the crucial mistake in this movie.
Oh yeah, I completely agree, because I mean, again, it's sad to some degree. Well, it's great now because we can notice it, but like to some degree, what the issue is like literally we have the lore dumps there. If we just all said the same thing for each one of those, we'd be set. If they all just said the same stuff, it's a shape-shifting witch, it's a shape-shifting witch. I mean, if we didn't change like the ending and whatnot. But if you just said the correct three things that we ended up doing, then you'll basically be able to have a really solid plot here. And again, it's something that took us into the forest. It took us Suicide House to really understand that you have to pick three or pick two or pick one or pick whatever it is and run with it at least three times. So I'm very excited again to see just how much of an improvement. I think that's going to really be the biggest improvement. So we cut back to there. They give a little warning about Nelson, which is always great because again, he's kind of our red herring. And then boom, he shows up, the man, the myth, Nelson Morgan. And I think this is, he did an amazing job there. And the tension of this is really, really good. It shows a desperate parent. And I think it is one of the reasons why, of all the elements that we had, Nelson was one of the elements that were like, this definitely stays.
Yeah, this was the first time we had like a guy come in there and like really own the part and really do a really, really good job. I remember this scene up through the scene where he pulls a gun on himself. When he actually finished that, I was like, whoa, like we actually have like a really crazy scene in here. And I think it shows the problem that we had was like, this guy just kind of comes in, delivers this amazing interview, does this super intense scene in the woods, and then he's gone. This was the best character in this movie. And we just kind of let him go, and he should come back because now it's just like we have nothing to really drive the plot forward. It's just that the other guys go back, but I mean, Nelson should have stuck around or at least come back in this movie. He did such a great job, such a cool character. And the fact that we kind of just get rid of him after, 5 or 6 pages, was another mistake that we had. I think this character, and the actor did a great job bringing him to life. But even if we didn't have that actor, this character is so cool and so unique that he should have just stayed with them the rest of the movie. And we just didn't do that. And I think it kind of falls off. I think the movie falls off after this scene. And we aren't able to actually build the tension and the pacing that we did in the first essentially 30 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, I think, we struck gold with Nelson, and you have him. He goes out there. You have the very intense scene where he pulls a gun on himself. And then you have the police take him away and he's gone. And I will say one of my favorite things about the police officer is we did not really have the wardrobe as accurate because, man, that's such a baggy police officer for him to come up. But yeah, just like that, he's gone. And then, from there, we do basically have the hook to bring them back in is that they hear some noises. But before we hear the noises, before we have that classic found footage, hey, we picked up stuff on the footage, we have just probably the biggest example of just lore being all over the place, which is them out on the back porch talking about so there was at some point the idea that our lead female would have like a connection. And I mean, you can still, every once in a while, she can sense things and stuff like that. But there's a brief conversation between her and Bo about like, do you remember the time and the well? I remember what it saw. We don't literally have any specifics whatsoever. It was only to be like mysterious. And literally I would say not only is it neutral, it's negative. It's legitimately completely confusing people because there's nothing that really touches on this ever again. And I think that kind of highlights again when you do have these downbeats, pick what you're going to explain and just drive it home. It should, again, if this was them saying again that, what do you think? Was it Nelson? Was it the witch? Well, that time we saw a witch, like I believe in the paranormal, at least that would have been good. This was just vague and kind of out there.
Yeah, this was this is a 1-2 punch of just really not being good. And this is like on my top 10 like scenes that I hate the most, because not only is this dialogue absolutely horrible, but it has, like what you said, it has nothing to do with this movie. And the problem is you're bringing up something that is just that happened in the past that the viewer hasn't seen, that's never been brought up before, that really drives no purpose other than she has some kind of connection to the paranormal. But we've already kind of touched on that as much as it needed to be touched on, because Nelson says, hey, look, like you're the psychic. And we touch on it with like the nosebleeds and the fact that she is kind of the lead psychic person there. That's all we need to do. You didn't need to go any deeper. You didn't do anything else. We just had this really cool scene with Nelson occur. Why are they not talking about that? Is Nelson crazy? Or is he just kind of a drunk and, throwing out, he just got drunk and lost his daughter. And you have the dynamics in there. Bo doesn't believe him. Bo thinks he's a screw up and he probably ended up killing his daughter. And then Amy's like, no, there could be something out there. I do believe it. Look at that. You have your tension in there. You have different opinions, because as a viewer, you don't know what's going on right now. This is a great way right here to clarify things, build the lore, talk about Nelson, and it would just kept everything going. Instead, we pull this scene that you can't show the viewer. You're just telling them. That doesn't really make any sense. And man, like, I really hate The Well. I'm sorry. It's just not something that I like. So I think that this is just, once again, we're just compounding the error of just adding too much plot. We're just burying ourselves with plot right now that has nothing to do with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the case where it's such a shame because like I was saying, it hurts you more than anything, and you have such a limited time and limited space. But that's going to go ahead and bring us basically to the halfway point where they find the footage. They end up deciding, hey, we got to go back into the forest, and obviously things go super great for them from there on. With that being said, I kind of wanted to, before we wrap up this episode, talk about what's different. I think this is one of the more unique ones, and it's what I'm excited for when it comes to, talking about the Suicide House on the next week's episode, is because we're making this concept again. We're actively reviewing this concept. As you mentioned, you can watch this movie and literally won't be able to tell that these are connected just because you switch a few major things when you have a brand new movie. But really, going from the beginning to the midway point, is fairly similar. It really is kind of the same items. We're honing on the plot. So you want to kind of walk the guests through what the current setup is and the idea of getting them from here to that midpoint of the movie.
Yeah, and I don't want to give it away, but I'll kind of give you the broad strokes of what we're trying to do here. And I think this is just a really good movie. This screenplay is a solid screenplay. The writers did a great job on this. I think it's definitely one of our more solid screenplays. But it comes back to what I'm saying as far as like making a good movie, you have to almost avoid the pitfalls. And if you can go through a whole movie, go an hour and 20 minutes without like falling into one of these pitfalls, you'll have a very, very good movie. And I think we did that in The Murder House. The movie's doing really, really well. Top 5 on Amazon. Once it comes on Tubi here in the next couple of weeks, it's going to do really, really well. The reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. And I think that this one it falls into a couple of pit holes where the intro hook is very weak and the lore is not really developed, and we have some dialogue scenes that just aren't punchy or kind of like lose interest with the viewer. In the 2.0 version of this, we're making sure that the intro hits really hard. We're making sure them getting to the cabin is prioritized. We're, building their character through interviews. We're building the lore through interviews. So it's not them telling the viewer, you're actually seeing it through different characters. So once they essentially get to the location. You understand exactly the lore that we're building. We're understanding what they're trying to do. And then it's like, all right, now we know, what's going to happen with this movie. We have a scare that's hopefully more punchy, quicker in the movie. And then, honestly, we have like 3 or 4 scares right after that. We're building this movie. This one's paced like almost like the Shapeshifter. I think it's going to be very quick. It's going to be very fast. We have objectives and we're going to go there as quickly as possible. But I think that the difference right now with this movie is, we're explaining exactly what's out there, what's going on. There's a witch. We're telling you through different people, different interviewers, which is going to be easy to edit and cut through. And, I think the scares, we're just going to spend more time just really making sure that they're punchier and you're getting like a little bit of adrenaline rush to hook you and make you watch this movie from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other big thing that I kind of wanted to touch on that I think is really good, as you mentioned, we did clean up a lot of things, but I feel like we are laser focused now on essentially what the plot is and how it relates to Nelson as a character and involving Nelson and a lot more of it. But really, the most important thing here, and I think the way that this movie missed the most, was not linking up these plot points to be super focused. And I mean, again, not only is it something that's going to move fast, but I think of our stories specifically, I think Murder House, we did a great job. I think Shapeshifter, we did a good job in the sense of it too, especially having like the Roger scene. But I think in this one, because the plot is kind of very straightforward in the sense that we immediately address what's happening because of the nature of found footage, because basically, our found footage team is talking to the audience, we directly explain it. So in my opinion, I think this is probably one of the most clear plots that we have of any of our movies.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was like, yeah, we're bringing Nelson's going to be a big time role in this movie. Like I said, he was our better character. I think his story's good and he's able to deliver a lot of lore. Like, listen, his daughter got taken. He finds this documentary crew and they're going to go out there and film it because he's convinced that he can get her back, that he knows how to get her back. And that already in itself is a very linear plot line. You're going in there, they're going to record it, and we're going to go out there and see if he can get his daughter back. And we're going to see how he's going to actually make this exchange with the witch. And I think that is just super solid. And we make sure that it's very clear from start to finish.
Yep. So I'm very excited for this one. I really do think it's going to be easily one of our better ones. I'm also really excited for it because I'm curious about our turnaround speed in the sense of how quickly we have it done with it being found footage. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Be sure to check into the next episode where we cover the last half of Into the Forest and kind of explain the difference that we have in the new one, at least that we're doing. Be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online. That's the place to be. Be sure to take a look at our new movie, The Haunted in the Murder House. We also have this movie Into the Forest on Tubi for free, as well as The Girl in Cabin 13. But until then, have a good one.